Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thanks very much for joining us for today's webinar, where we'll launch the Toolkit for Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning for National Adaptation Plan Processes. Today's webinar is hosted by the Adaptation Committee and the National Adaptation Plan, or NAP Global Network. My name is Christian Ledwell, and I'm the Knowledge Manager with the NAP Global Network Secretariat. Today I'll be co-moderating with my colleague Shafak Masood, who is just getting connected here. So she'll be online momentarily. Just to start with a few housekeeping announcements. Today's session is going to be 60 minutes long. Please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself, typing your name into the chat. And please let us know your affiliation as well. We're recording the session in English, and we'll share the video and slides after the fact on our website, on the NAP Global Network website. And today we also have simultaneous translation available in French and Spanish. If you have any questions, comments, or if there are any technical issues, please just let us know in the chat box, and my colleague Sarah will be happy to help you out. So we have a really exciting panel of speakers today to share their knowledge and expertise on climate change adaptation with a specific focus on monitoring, evaluation, and learning for NAP processes. First, we're going to hear from Britta Horsman, who is the co-chair of the Adaptation Committee. Britta currently works for GIZ as an advisor to the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, and is a member of the EU negotiation team to the UNFCCC. She has 25 years of experience in the areas of climate change risks, sustainable development, and international cooperation, specializing in international adaptation politics and finance. To share Senegal's experience with monitoring, evaluation, and learning for the NAP process, we're fortunate to be joined by Dibor Sarr, who is an Adaptation Program Officer and UNFCCC National Gender Focal Point in the Climate Change Division in the Ministry of Environment, Sustainable Development for Senegal. Dibor holds degrees in engineering and urban planning, as well as decentralization and local development, and has more than a decade of experience working with the government of Senegal. And from the NAP Global Network, we're joined by Emily Beauchamp, who is the lead for monitoring, evaluation, and learning for adaptation to climate change. She has over 15 years of experience in MEL and sustainability policy. Emily provides technical support for designing MEL systems and supports the National Adaptation Plan processes. So first off, we'll hear from Britta, who will share insights on the importance of MEL systems for NAP implementation processes. Britta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much, and hello to our guests. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Adaptation Committee to launch the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Toolkit alongside the NAP Global Network. It has also been a pleasure working together with the NAP Global Network and all of you here in this call on this toolkit, and I would explicitly like to thank you and the authors for their good work. We hope as AC that this toolkit will be a valuable resource for governments and practitioners around the world. And my presentation will provide some insights into the importance of monitoring, evaluation, and learning for National Adaptation Plan processes. Before going and diving into that topic, let me briefly provide some information on the work of the Adaptation Committee for those who don't know the Adaptation Committee yet. If we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Adaptation Committee was established in 2010 as part of the Cancun Adaptation Framework and is the principal body under the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, providing expert guidance on adaptation and ensuring that adaptation is addressed coherently under the UNFCCC process and in line with the Paris Agreement. The AAC's work centers around 5 core functions, which include a mandate to provide technical support and guidance to parties, to share relevant information, and promoting synergies and engagement with national, regional, and international organizations, to consider information communicated by parties, and last but not least, to provide recommendations for consideration by parties. As part of this work, the AC has long prioritized work on monitoring and evaluation. This topic featured in the first ever work plan of the AC and has remained a continuous theme in its events and publications ever since. We have held workshops and forums related to monitoring and evaluation, and have published various technical papers that have focused on different dimensions of this topic Just a few months ago, we published a technical paper on the development and application of MEL systems at the national and subnational level. The toolkit being launched today is the latest component of our monitoring and evaluation related work. So why are MEL systems for NAP processes important? First of all, monitoring and evaluation and learning is a fundamental component of adaptation to climate change. Adaptation in human systems is commonly defined as the process of adjustment to actual or expected climate and its effects in order to moderate harm or exploit beneficial opportunities. This process of adjustment relies on continuous feedback from monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And indeed, monitoring evaluation has been highlighted also by the IPCC as a prerequisite for successful iterative risk management and achieving effective and just adaptation outcomes. In the absence of monitoring, evaluation, and learning, adaptation intervention risks being ineffective, insufficient, or in a worst case, even maladaptive. In recognition of this fundamental role, monitoring, evaluation, and learning is enshrined in Article 7.9 of the Paris Agreement and is also reflected in other areas, such as the guidelines on national adaptation plans under the UNFCCC by the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, or in the latest UAE framework for global climate resilience as a core step of the iterative adaptation policy cycle. The second main reason for the importance of MEL systems is that national MEL systems lay the foundation for effective, inclusive, and transformative adaptation processes. These formalize and institutionalize the process of adaptation, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, thereby helping to lay the foundation for effective, inclusive, and transformative adaptation processes. They do so in a variety of ways, including helping to understand the effectiveness of NAP processes by identifying what works, why, and who benefits, by strengthening equity and the inclusion in adaptation processes and outcomes, by improving adaptive management and accountability, by identifying challenges and documenting how they are addressed, enhancing the efficiency by identifying areas where planning and implementation can be optimized, and they can help mobilizing domestic and international public and private finance by signaling financial efficiency and accountability and facilitating the tracking of implementation and reporting of results. Third, national MEL systems for NAP processes. If we could have the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So third, national MEL systems for NAP processes support reporting and transparency, including by generation information that can be used for international reporting and communication purposes. Under the UN climate change process, this includes information included in adaptation communications, national determined contributions, biannual transparency reports, which are due this year, or national communications. Additionally, information from MEL systems can be used to prepare or update national adaptation plans. Fourth main reason is that these reports, communications, and plans in turn can help inform global processes that enable us to understand where we stand with respect to meeting international goals and targets as well. This includes the global stocktake, which is the cyclical mechanism established under the Paris Agreement to periodically assess collective progress towards the agreement's long-term goals. It also includes understanding progress towards the UAE framework for global climate resilience, which was adopted in December with the purpose of guiding the achievement of the global goal on adaptation and the review of overall progress in achieving it. With the framework, parties are urged and non-party stakeholders invited to pursue objectives related to the 7 thematic areas, which you see here on the left side of the slides. I won't read them, and some of you might be familiar with them already. And furthermore, parties decided on 4 targets related to the dimensions of the iterative cycle related to impacts, vulnerability, and risk assessment, planning, the implementation, but also monitoring and evaluation and learning itself. And this leads us to the last main reason, so fifth. This target on MEL represents another major reasons of why to think about setting up MEL systems, and they are important. And the target sets the ambition for all parties to have designed, established, and operationalized a system for MEL for their national adaptation efforts and have built the required institutional capacity to fully implement the system by 2030. Last slide. So there are more reasons for why it is important to implement MEL systems, which I've not detailed yet, on which you will find further information also in the toolkit. However, whereas the importance of monitoring, evaluation, and learning is widely recognized in science and politics, it is also clear that setting up MEL system remains a persistent challenge in practice. The challenges range from data management and institutional coordination to designing systems that both provide meaningful information and are implementable and sustainable over the same time, at the same time. And more info on these you can also find in the case studies of our latest technical paper, which we've published last year. And there are also studies, one study from 2029 that found that more than 60% of countries that had adopted a national adaptation plan were not yet tracking its implementation. And also the recent UNEP Adaptation Gap Report found that 24% of countries had a MEL system in place, while an additional 90% were in the process of developing one. Which led to the conclusion and to the suggestion that there is a need for continued and enhanced capacity building support in this area. The toolkit in this context therefore aims to provide a comprehensive guide to countries as they navigate these challenges associated with putting in place MEL systems, also offering a timely support as efforts in this area accelerate to meet the 2030 target of the UAE framework. So if you are working on MEL, on adaptation, and or interested in the work of the AC on MEL, we invite you to stay in touch. You can find further information under the link posted here. And I thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Christian.
Thanks so much, Britta. So next we'll hear from our colleague Emily Beauchamp from the NAP Global Network Secretariat, who's going to provide a brief introduction to the NAP Global Network and an overview of the MEL toolkit. Emily, the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much. And I'll just take this note to please ask one of our interpreter to give back the host powers to our NAP Global Network. I think that's just been done. Thank you so much. Dealing with technical problems as we go along. So thank you so much. I'm delighted to have this launch today for the toolkit for MEL of National Adaptation Plan processes. Next. For those who don't know us, the NAP Global Network, we are a network, and we're really, our goal is to enhance national adaptation planning and action in developing countries. And we work with developing country governments on three main pillars. So first, we support national level action on NAP development and implementation through technical support. We also help countries learn from each other through South-South peer learning and exchanges. And finally, we generate, synthesize, and share knowledge on NAP processes, for example, like this toolkit. Next. So unveiling the toolkit, this has been in the works for over a year. And the aim of the toolkit is to support countries in the development and the implementation of national MEL systems for NAP processes by producing actionable guidance. So it draws on over a decade of experience from the NAP Global Network and the Adaptation Committee. It is developed for national government teams, and I'll share a bit more about that. The team working on adaptation and on MEL for adaptation and the supporting actors. And it brings comprehensive theory and actions that are essential but feasible for advancing MEL adaptation by country actors. And we're not reinventing the wheel here, is really bringing a lot of the resources together. And we're featuring over 30 case studies to really give a taste of what it looks like. Next. So first, how do we define MEL for NAP processes? Well, there's quite a chunk in the toolkit that looks into that, but there's one point of awkwardness usually in MEL, that is the fact that monitoring, evaluation, and learning occur both as a distinct phase and as a dedicated set of activities throughout the adaptation process. And you can see on the graph on your left that monitoring is the pale blue circle that goes along the way, so happens all around the NAP process. You have evaluations occurring at different key points of the NAP process. And finally, you have all around this in dark blue, monitoring and evaluation that are embedded in learning throughout the NAP process. So it's really important. It's one of the key messages of the toolkit that monitoring and evaluation activities always need to be linked with deliberate learning throughout the NAP process. So that's great, but what does this mean? What does this graph mean in practice for governments that are working on NAP processes? Next. Before getting into this, I'm going to say how the toolkit was produced. So we first kicked it off in April 2023. So it's been over a year in the making, and it's taking us so long for a couple of reasons. First, because we really wanted to engage and consult with other organizations, peer organizations, actors working in the field. So we consulted with over 15 international NGOs and civil society institutions working a lot on MEL for adaptation. We discussed with over 10 country partners and global experts working on their national MEL systems to understand what was out there and what was needed. So we did a first draft and peer reviews in September and December. We presented at quite a few conferences, so you may have heard us before, Adaptation Futures, at COP28, and we've presented also the work at 3 of the Adaptation Committee meetings. And then we did a second peer review and revisions from January to April. Next. And one of the reasons why it's taking us a bit of time is because we've restructured the toolkit to make it really accessible to adaptation and NAP practitioners. That means that the toolkit is actually structured in terms of the main monitoring, evaluation, and learning actions that countries should undertake at the different stages of the NAP process. And here we're using the different phases of the iterative adaptation cycle to align with the recent decision on the UAE framework for global climate resilience. So as you can see on the graph, we're actually saying what are the main actions you need to go through each phase. And that, we believe, really is going to improve readability and accessibility for adaptation experts, rather than providing a toolkit that looks at just monitoring, evaluation, and learning without giving the triangulation with the adaptation phase. Next. So I can hear you say, oh, it is great. Okay, you're giving us these actions per phases, but actually, countries rarely work on MEL system and NAP processes in a linear way. And in fact, countries start working on their MEL systems at different phases of the NAP process. There is rarely nothing in place. So the toolkit does acknowledge that critical reality for countries, and we provide easy and navigatable links between sections for the readers to start according to their own starting point, their own context. And we recognize that countries have different levels of capacities and resources. So we have a comparative picture of what MEL systems can comprise of, but nothing is compulsory. We have 19 sub-actions with guidance and additional resources, and 33 practical examples with a lot of key resources. Next. So just to give you an overview of how you can use the toolkit so it doesn't seem too overwhelming when you open the 150 pages. Countries that start working with MEL frameworks can read the toolkit in order of the actions. So start from the beginning. If you have nothing, or if you're starting from almost nothing, then you start with getting started. And one of the things that we also acknowledge in the content is the need to do a phased approach with developing your MEL system. But so you can read through the actions no matter where you are in the phase of your NAP processes. Next. And then nope, that was a bit too much. And countries with existing MEL frameworks can also read the toolkit in order to focus on specific key phases. So here I've highlighted the phase of planning. So if you already have done some of the initial steps for your MEL system, like understanding your context, having your purpose, linking it with climate risk assessments, then you can start digging in already into planning your MEL system, monitoring indicators, and also how to commit to learning, because committing to learning is important from the very start. Next. We've got some easy navigation link between sections. So between the 5 sections where you have the 19 actions, so you can go, you can navigate through. Next. Another thing we're quite happy with is that we've flagged throughout the toolkit key considerations, important considerations to really highlight in the text what countries and readers should pay extra attention to. The other thing is that we've mainstreamed gender equality and social inclusion considerations throughout the text. And you'll find that whilst we have a section on GESI, on gender equality and social inclusion at the very beginning of the toolkit, actually what we've done, instead of having separated sections, we've mainstreamed it. And we think this is really important because it doesn't get left to the last of the theory. It is really in there with the action so that readers will take into account GESI considerations as they go along. Next. We also have quite a few practical examples and list of featured resources. So you please do dig into our bibliographies and these resources to continue your learning and your reading. Next. Finally, please download the toolkit for MEL for NAP processes. Next. And just to tell you a bit about the next step. So the NAP Global Network is developing an online course over 2024 and is going to launch early in 2025. They are flagging on behalf of our partner ongoing potential trainings by the Adaptation Committee this year. So keep an eye on this. And we will be reviewing the toolkit every 2-3 years to stay up to date. So this is a living body of work. And that means that your feedback and comments are always welcome. This is a learning process. This is the first of the toolkit. And we hope to continue and get better. So for that, the door is open. Please do get in touch and let us know what you think. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. So next we'll hear from Dibor Sarr, who's going to share a presentation on the monitoring and evaluation system for adaptation in Senegal and the challenges and opportunities that it presents. So Dibor, over to you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, on vous entend.
Oui, je pense que Émilie va projeter la présentation. Moi, je me présente, je m'appelle Ndeye Nabosso. Je travaille au niveau de la direction changement climatique, transition écologique et financement vert au niveau du ministère de l'Environnement. Je suis une collègue à Madame Dibor Sarr, empêchée, et je vais faire la présentation à sa place. Oui. Et en fait, comme vous le savez tous, je pense que c'était un défi pour les pays paiements surtout, de mettre en place, comme demandé dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris, mettre en place un système de suivi pour l'adaptation. Vu qu'au niveau mondial, il n'y a pas des indicateurs prédéfinis, standardisés pour l'adaptation. Nous, au niveau du Sénégal, on a eu à bénéficier de l'appui de la facilité Adaptation financée par l'AFD pour la première phase qui nous a permis en fait de mettre en place, de lancer ce processus de mise en place du système de suivi de l'adaptation. Lors de la première phase, ce qu'on a eu à faire, c'est tout d'abord de dresser les contours de ce système de suivi avec l'ensemble des acteurs et des parties prenantes identifiés dans la CDN du Sénégal, et identifier également les défis pour la mise en œuvre de ce système. Slide suivant, Émilie, s'il te plaît. Comme vous le savez, en fait, comme je le disais, notre CDN a été un CDN sectoriel, et au niveau de l'adaptation, on avait eu à couvrir 8 secteurs. Le secteur de l'agriculture, de l'élevage, des ressources en eau, des inondations, de la pêche, du littoral, de la biodiversité et de la santé. Ces secteurs, la construction, en fait, s'est fait avec l'ensemble des acteurs impliqués dans la CDN et on a eu à élaborer un cadre logique sur la base des consultations. On a eu à avoir 8 cadres logiques sectoriels. Pour chaque secteur, un cadre logique avec des indicateurs ont été élaborés. Et sur la base de ces 8 cadres logiques, un cadre logique harmonisé a été élaboré avec l'ensemble des parties prenantes. En plus de ces sectoriels, on a eu certains ministères comme le ministère des Finances, le ministère de l'Économie qui ont eu à être impliqués dans le cadre de ce système. Tout d'abord, comme je le disais, il y a l'établissement de cadres logiques sectoriels et global qui a été validé avec l'ensemble des sectoriels. Suite à ce cadre logique, un manuel de procédure, un manuel de cadrage a été élaboré et validé aussi avec toutes les parties prenantes. On a eu à faire des séances de présélection d'indicateurs au niveau des secteurs et harmoniser ça au niveau du cadre logique harmonisé. Et là, on a fait par la suite organiser des ateliers de coaching pour chaque secteur et un atelier national pour le cadre logique harmonisé. Slide suivant. En fait, l'aperçu du système qui a été mis en place sur la base des indicateurs qui ont été identifiés au niveau des secteurs, on a pu faire sortir 3 types d'indicateurs au niveau de la cadre logique harmonisée. Tout d'abord, on a eu des indicateurs de suivi des changements climatiques, permettant notamment une veille sur l'évolution de certains paramètres climatiques avec les paramètres de température, d'élévation du niveau de la mer et des précipitations, comme certains paramètres, suivis au niveau du Sénégal avec la direction de la météorologie. Il y a aussi comme indicateur le suivi du processus d'adaptation, permettant de faire le point sur les projets et programmes d'adaptation avec le suivi au niveau de leur réalisation et des montants alloués à ces programmes. Il y a également le suivi des résultats et impacts de ces projets au niveau des systèmes économiques et sociaux et même aussi au niveau du système naturel. Sur la base de ces 3 types d'indicateurs, il y a des informations qu'on requiert des sectoriels pour renseigner en fait ce système. Comme je le disais, nous, le système qui est mis en place, on a eu à demander aux sectoriels de désigner des points focaux. On a eu des points focaux sectoriels, mais on a aussi le point focal du système de suivi qui est le ministère en charge de l'environnement. Il y a aussi un comité technique qui a été mis en place. Et ce comité technique regroupe l'ensemble des points focaux de 8 secteurs. Et il y a également les services de la statistique. Il y a aussi la recherche qui est impliquée dans ce comité technique. Il y a aussi l'aviation, l'Agence nationale de l'aviation, qui est chargée de suivre tout ce qui est, comment dirais-je, tout ce qui est les données climatiques au niveau du Sénégal. Il y a aussi le centre de suivi écologique, le ministère, comme je le disais, de l'économie et des finances qui est impliqué dans ce comité technique et qui est chargé de faire le suivi de l'évaluation, de l'évolution de la CDN. Slide suivante. Le diapo qui est affiché actuellement, en fait, fait un peu le design de comment on a pu élaborer ce système. Comme je le disais, vous verrez en haut, on a les secteurs, les 8 secteurs identifiés dans la CDN avec les points focaux au niveau de ces secteurs. On a le ministère de l'économie, du plan et de la coopération qui fait partie de ce comité, le ministère des Finances et du Budget, le centre de suivi écologique et l'ensemble aussi des autres secteurs qui ne figurent pas aussi dans la CDN, mais qui aujourd'hui, si le Sénégal était amené à réviser sa CDN, peuvent venir aujourd'hui renseigner ce CDN, font partie de ce comité. Il y a la partie assurance qualité qui est aujourd'hui suivie avec la recherche, mais aussi les structures chargées de tout ce qui est données climatiques, tout ce qui est donné par rapport à l'élévation du niveau de la mer, par rapport à l'eau, tout ça, ils font partie de ce comité technique. Et ce comité technique aujourd'hui est présidé par le ministère en charge du changement climatique. Et ce comité rend compte et la direction, je veux dire, est chargée de faire le rapport final au niveau de l'UNFCCC. Il y a aussi le comité national changement climatique qu'on a au niveau du Sénégal qui fait partie de ce comité. Slide suivant. En termes de sources d'information, on peut dire que le système statistique national est un outil qui peut renseigner en fait le système de suivi et évaluation. Il y a également l'agence météorologique, il y a les projets et programmes qui sont agréés au niveau des ministères sectoriels. Il y a les actions aussi qui sont menées au niveau local avec les ONG et entre autres. Slide suivante. Le tableau qui se présente actuellement fait un petit résumé par rapport à certains indicateurs qui ont été identifiés. On a l'exemple de l'agriculture avec des pourcentages de terres agricoles sous pratique de GDT. Mais il y a des indicateurs qui sont des indicateurs multisectoriels qui seront renseignés par tous les secteurs, comme le montant engagé pour les études techniques opérationnelles visant à mieux connaître les défis du changement climatique. Il faut dire que l'identification de ces indicateurs, comme je le disais, a été faite de manière très inclusive et participative avec l'ensemble des sectoriels. Slide suivant. Comme opportunité, le ministère en charge de l'environnement, qui est point focal, pourra améliorer en fait la coordination des interventions au niveau national avec ce dispositif de suivi. Et les ministères sectoriels et transversaux pourront améliorer leur système existant parce qu'on est parti des systèmes existants au niveau sectoriel pour voir comment mettre en place ce système de suivi de l'adaptation, quels sont les éléments complémentaires, quels sont les indicateurs qui sont déjà suivis au niveau des sectoriels qui peuvent renseigner la CDN de l'adaptation. Pour le monde de la recherche, ils peuvent ainsi disposer de données, d'informations, de statistiques appropriées et de meilleure qualité pour orienter les recherches en matière de changement climatique. Il y a aussi les collectivités territoriales qui disposent d'un outil de plaidoyer et de mobilisation des ressources. Slide suivant. En termes de défis, je dirais que le challenge principal, c'est le dynamisme de l'animation et de la coordination de ce système. Elle est mise en place au niveau du ministère, mais elle est renseignée par les ministères sectoriels. Donc, il faut que ce dynamisme soit continuel et que à temps réel, les points focaux puissent transmettre les informations nécessaires pour le suivi. Il y a la bonne collaboration et la synergie entre les différents secteurs. Certains indicateurs peuvent être pour le ministère, si je peux donner l'exemple de l'agriculture, mais que les données peuvent provenir d'un autre ministère comme le ministère de l'eau. Sur le plan technique, on a un problème avec les lenteurs des remontées d'informations. Il y a l'absence de contrôle de qualité des données, la défaillance dans les circuits de collecte de l'information et la non prise en compte de l'adaptation au changement climatique dans les systèmes existants. Sur le plan des ressources en eau, il y a la faiblesse des effectifs et le manque de qualification en suivi, évaluation. Sur le plan financier, je pense qu'on a presque tous les mêmes défis, c'est les questions de ressources allouées aux unités en charge de suivre tout ce qui est indicateur, tout ce qui est indicateur surtout d'adaptation au changement climatique, vu que les services n'ont pas l'habitude de suivre ce type d'indicateur. Slide suivant. En fait, le rôle de ce système dans l'efficacité des mesures d'adaptation, c'est le dispositif qui va permettre d'améliorer, de corriger et de réorienter à chaque fois que nécessaire les options et les projets en matière d'adaptation et aussi nos politiques climatiques, surtout en matière d'adaptation. Ça va permettre aussi de bâtir des mesures robustes sur la base de données issues d'observation in situ. Ça va renforcer aussi la continuité des capacités de l'ensemble, le renforcement des capacités de l'ensemble des acteurs et éviter la maladaptation qu'on connaît le plus souvent dans nos pays et corriger les incohérences qui auparavant pouvaient exister. Slide suivant. Je pense que c'est terminé pour ma présentation. Je m'en arrête là et je remercie le NAP Global Network pour cette initiative. Merci à vous. Je reste à l'écoute pour vos éventuelles questions.
Thank you so much to Ms. Diana Basso for that really rich presentation, sharing Senegal's experience, and for giving that presentation on behalf of Ms. Diboissar. So next we'll move to the question and answer period. So please feel free to write your questions in English, French, or Spanish in the chat. And I would ask our panelists just to please turn their cameras on. And so the first question that we have, I think I'll ask to Emily. And so Emily, this is quite a comprehensive resource. It's over 150 pages. If a country's NAP team doesn't have a lot of resources for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, how can they tackle improving the MEL system for the NAP process with maybe limited resources in terms of financial resources and staff? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. And what I'll also ask other fellow co-authors who are on the line to put their cameras on, and they're also welcome to answer some questions. So please welcome Shafak Masoud, Timo Laita, and Nick Brooks, who can be part of the panel as well. But going back to how to tackle MEL systems and this 150-page resource. Well, the first thing is that there is no compulsory part. Countries always have to go according to the context and start with understanding the context and the purpose of their MEL system, and that's really gonna frame what are the next steps and the actions. So as you go through the toolkit, you can figure out, and we have a lot of markers to say, you know, is this step feasible for you? Is this step appropriate for you at this stage of your NAP process? What do you have to implement it? And would you, or should you go to the next one? Or actually, should you go back and look more into some of the gaps and needs that have not yet been established? So the toolkit has really been structured and created to account for these practical realities that countries are facing. So not everything in the toolkit is expected to be implemented. But at the same time, we wanted to have really an overview of everything that can be done, so that there is no, so that countries do have an ambition to realize different activities. For example, on evaluations, we know that evaluations and progress reporting on that processes aren't yet a common practice. This is really picking up. But we know that a lot of capacity constraints mean that it's not possible, but at least countries can understand what they want to do from their place of start.
Well, for the next question, it's for Ms. Diana Basso. I'll read it out in French and then give it an attempt in French. But the question is that the audience member didn't see any indicators linked to gender. And they're asking how gender is being integrated into Senegal's NAP process. And so in French, je n'ai pas vu d'indicateurs liés au genre. Je voudrais savoir comment la question du genre est prise en compte dans le PNA au Sénégal. Thanks. So I'll pass to our colleague to share that experience from Senegal, please.
Merci beaucoup, toutes mes excuses. Par rapport à la question concernant le genre, c'est vrai que dans la première étape, parce que ce système-là, nous l'avons construit à travers un appui qu'on a avec la facilité Adaptation de l'AFD qui appuie les pays dans la mise en œuvre de leur CDN. Et dans la première phase, on a pu construire ce système-là. Malheureusement, il faut dire que les questions de genre ne sont pas très bien prises en compte, mais dans la deuxième phase où le déploiement de l'outil est prévu, nous allons retravailler avec l'ensemble des sectoriels pour voir en tout cas par rapport à l'ensemble des indicateurs, quels sont les indicateurs qui peuvent être désagrégés pour prendre en compte la question de genre. Ce travail-là, il est vraiment prévu de le faire dans la deuxième phase qui a démarré et pour lequel ce travail-là sera fait bientôt. Merci.
Thank you very much. Our next question I'll direct perhaps to Britta. And so, Britta, countries are asked to submit their first biennial transparency report, or BTR, this year. And so what suggestions do you have to efficiently link monitoring, evaluation, and learning as a continuous process with BTRs that countries are invited to submit periodically to the UNFCCC?
Yes, thank you for that question. If you consult the handbook of the CGE group, that's the body under the UNFCCC that provides guidance also for countries on how to report on BTRs, you will find a section on adaptation, which outlines potential points you might want to address. And depending on the adaptation activities that you have identified in the country, you can use this MEL system, of course, then also to report and link the two tasks at the same time. So that depends a bit on the national activities that you undertake and for which you have an MEL system. But the information, of course, you collect through that system can at the same time be used as a basis for the BTR itself.
Thank you very much, Britta. And apologies, my Zoom just restarted as there was a technical glitch. So the next question I'll direct to the co-authors. This is a question on how to link this toolkit for monitoring of disaster risk reduction processes outlined in national strategies and other policy frameworks. Emily, would you like to respond first, please?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the process for monitoring DR processes and actions, I mean, you have in reality a lot of overlap between some of the basis of DRR actions, disaster risk reduction, and adaptation action. And so there should be a very joint effort in tracking these actions and also in tracking how DRR actions and adaptation actions are indeed reducing the risks and the vulnerability linked to climate change through the NAP processes. So in reality, you'll have DRR plans done by countries and you'll have NAP processes done by countries. And these two, along with other policies, should really speak with each other and be aligned with each other. They work together and they shouldn't be done in silos. In the same way, the MEL systems that are tracking the effectiveness and the impact of these policies and these actions should be very much interlinked. For example, if we're looking at how climate risk assessments identify the main vulnerabilities and risks that can be addressed through the RR and through adaptation, then you need to link your mail systems to see how much and whose risks and whose vulnerabilities are being reduced. So we actually, I'll just point out that we have actually a whole chapter in the toolkit that is about linking your climate risk assessments with your mail system. So, and we have some resources about this. So please do look at the mail toolkit. I also open the door if some of the co-authors would also like to say something.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I think we have Nick Brooks on the line. Nick, are you able to unmute, please?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just to emphasize what Emily has just said, but also to point out that, increasingly DRR systems and adaptation systems need to be linked themselves. So not just the MEL. Increasingly, climate change is going to mean that disaster risks are going to involve or intensify, at least for hydrometeorological disasters. And so I think, at a more fundamental level, countries need to be looking at these things together. And perhaps trying to integrate those systems. Of course, that might not be that sort of easy depending on how the governance systems are set up. But I think we need to take it back a step further and just encourage countries to think about looking at adaptation and disaster risk reduction as sort of part of the same package, really.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. So our next question is from Dr. Anish Chatterjee from GIZ India. And his question is, are there any linkages with SDG indicators and in the MEL toolkit? And I think that this speaks to the previous question on alignment, but Britta, Emily, Shafak, who would like to respond to this question?
I can take it as a start, and I maybe point to Timo if you want to complement my response. But so one of the things that we emphasized from the beginning is the need for the MEL system for NAP processes and for adaptation to take into account of existing systems and to link, just like with disaster risk reduction, with other policies that are really affecting adaptation. And so any policies on sustainable development and the SDGs should also be one of the bases through which MEL systems for the NAP processes get built. And that also flows into all the monitoring, the indicators and the evaluations. So in a sense, the toolkit does not include a mapping of the overlaps between adaptation indicators and SDG indicators, because there is such a variety. There are so many indicators on adaptation because it's very contextualized. So many indicators on the SDGs that need to be contextualized by countries, by communities, by local actors. So it wouldn't be possible nor desirable to actually do that mapping. What we're actually doing to the toolkit is that we're guiding countries and practitioners to think through what are the framing for the MEL system, what are the existing indicators for adaptation, for the SDGs, etc., that can contribute to the purpose of that MEL system for NAP processes, and then how to select and identify indicators for that NAP process that are overlapping, complementing, etc., with the SDGs and with other policies.
Great, thanks, Emily. The next question, Britta, please.
Yeah, maybe I can complement to this question, because I think it's very important, and it's really important to use the existing indicators to the extent possible. So setting up a MEL system does not mean that the tracking system or the MEL system as such, this have to be reinvented, but it should be built on existing MEL systems, and that can include the SDG related indicators or information that is being collected in a country. And to the extent that it is relevant, of course, for the existing national adaptation processes. If you remember the main themes and priorities that were highlighted by parties in the last CMA decision, the UAE Framework for Global Climate Resilience, I had shown that slides on the 7 areas there: water, food and agriculture, health, biodiversity, infrastructure, poverty, cultural heritage. So these these are key priorities that parties have highlighted for them, where they think these are areas of work that are particularly relevant for adaptation work. And if you look into those, you will recognize that they overlap to a great extent with the existing SDG targets. So it's really important, I think, to consider to consider that as well, because in the end it's about climate proofing development, and it should be closely related to existing development processes in a country.
Thank you, Britta. The next question I'll direct to our colleagues from Senegal, Dieynaba and Dibor. And the question is, how are you decentralizing the MEL system for adaptation? And Emily, could I put you on the spot to translate that in French for our colleagues?
Oui, pas de souci, no problem. Yes, donc, Dieynaba, la question est d'un participant qui a contribué au système de SEA du Sénégal. Et en fait, il pose la question de jusqu'à quel niveau est-ce que le système national de SEA est décentralisé au Sénégal et un peu comment?
OK. Pour le moment, nous sommes au niveau national, nous sommes au niveau sectoriel. Maintenant, il y a 2 semaines de cela, on était en atelier avec l'ensemble des secteurs pour voir un peu comment ce dispositif-là pourrait être étendu au niveau local. Et comme je le disais tantôt, dans le cadre de la facilité de phase de Adaptation, un consultant a été recruté pour également faire des propositions. Quelle architecture aujourd'hui et quel arrangement institutionnel il va falloir mettre en place pour pouvoir faire le rapportage au niveau des collectivités territoriales. Maintenant, peut-être revenir un peu par rapport au travail qui a été fait avec le secteur de l'élevage. Et là-bas, étant donné que, en tout cas, il y a des représentations au niveau régional, mais également au niveau départemental, c'est vraiment que le niveau départemental passe au niveau régional et que le niveau régional maintenant puisse faire parvenir les informations au niveau national, tout en sachant qu'aujourd'hui, on a des organisations qui sont en dehors du circuit officiel de l'État qu'il va falloir intégrer à ce système de suivi et évaluation. La réflexion, elle est là. Il va falloir trouver en tout cas les arrangements au sein de chaque secteur. Parce que l'organisation actuelle que nous avons mis en place, c'est d'avoir vraiment des points focaux au sein de chaque ministère. Maintenant, à ce point focal au sein de chaque ministère, ça peut être un service, ça peut être une direction, par exemple au ministère de l'Agriculture. C'est vraiment la direction chargée de la prévision des statistiques agricoles qui est le point focal, en tout cas suivi, évaluation des actions d'adaptation pour la CDN. Maintenant, on cherche à ce point focal-là de mettre en place l'organisation qui lui permettra en tout cas de pouvoir collecter l'ensemble des informations dont on aura besoin pour renseigner les indicateurs de la CDN. C'est un challenge, c'est un défi, nous en sommes conscients, mais le travail ne vient que de démarrer. Et vraiment, c'est en tout cas mettre ensemble l'ensemble des secteurs pour trouver la meilleure formule pour pouvoir être sûr que nous allons, à défaut de capitaliser 100% des actions qui sont au niveau territoire, c'est de pouvoir vraiment arriver à capitaliser les 90% des actions. C'est la réponse que je voulais donner. Merci.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we have time for two last questions. We have one of the Toolkit's co-authors, Timo Leiter, on the line. And so, Timo, perhaps you can speak to the question we just received on how do you approach linking monitoring and evaluation and learning of adaptation in the NDCs, or nationally determined contributions, and monitoring, evaluation, and learning for NAP processes. Timo, over to you.
Thanks, Christian, and hello, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone, for your great interest in the toolkit. Great to see it out, and great to see so many country colleagues. I recognize, for example, Grenada, with whom we've been collaborating in Morocco. Thank you for that. On the linkage between NDCs and NAP. So ideally, a country has the adaptation priorities and goals which it puts in its NDC would ideally be derived from its NAP. And therefore, if a country has a MEL system for its NAP processes, then that would also cover the NDC content. So we do not envision countries to have a separate M&E or MEL system for the adaptation part of its NDC and a separate one for the NAP document, but rather one system that tracks the national adaptation priorities, goals, and actions. And then countries can report in their BTR and or their adaptation communication or national communication, and they can use the information which the national MEL system for adaptation is generating, and they can use this information in their reporting under UNFCCC. And briefly on the indicators, so the purpose of this toolkit was not to recommend or suggest any list of indicators. In fact, for the 11 global targets, the indicators are being developed under the indicator work program. We had a workshop about this last week. And on the SDG linkage, so the current SDG indicators for SDG 13 on climate action lack ambition. For example, it's number of countries with a plan, so it would not be an option simply to adopt SDG indicators. If you are interested in the mapping of relevant SDG indicators that are relevant for adaptation, this has been done by a couple of organizations. For example, in 2019, there was a background paper on adaptation metrics for the Global Commission on Adaptation, which includes a table that looks through all the SDG indicators and which one are potentially relevant for adaptation, but that was not the scope or the purpose of our toolkit. Instead, in this detailed section on developing adaptation indicators for national adaptation MEL systems, we are outlining what different types of indicators are and what is important to develop indicators that fit to the purpose and to the context of a particular country. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Timo. So I see that we're out of time, and so I'm going to ask for one very quick reflection, one last takeaway message from our panelists, Emily, Dianaba, Britta, and Shafak. So Emily, over to you first. What's one takeaway you would like to share from this long process of developing the toolkit and that's now out in the world?
One takeaway from it's impossible, but I'll have one takeaway from just the conversation here and one of the points in the chat about evaluations and the question about indicators is, I think it's time for practitioners and for countries to really look at the whole of monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and not to over-focus just on monitoring and indicators. We really need more evaluative approaches to understand what is working and how and for whom. And most importantly, we need to have deliberate learning that comes with M&E actions, because otherwise it's all done a little bit in a void and in an emptiness. Thanks.
Thank you. Britta, one last message or key takeaway you'd like to share with those who have joined us here today.
For me, I would say it's an ongoing learning process. We are at the beginning of understanding how MEL systems can be set up, and understanding the attribution of an activity and a better adaptation outcome is a big challenge, and finding the right ways of describing it. And I think that was also highlighted by Maria from FAO in the chat, a comment we haven't addressed yet, but I think which is very important. So it's, I would say, a learning process over time for all countries at all levels. Yeah, I leave it at that.
Thank you, Britta. Shafak, thanks for joining. Sorry, there were some technical issues in joining, but one key takeaway you'd like to share as a co-author of the toolkit, please.
Thanks, Christian. I think one takeaway is that this toolkit hopefully helps to develop technical capacities and a better understanding on how MEL systems can help to measure adaptation more effectively, I think.
Excellent, thank you. And to our colleagues in Senegal, Dibor and Dianaba, one final word, one final takeaway you'd like to share with the audience?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Je pense que Dibor est toujours connecté. Mais moi, j'avais juste un petit message. C'est vrai que là, on a le défi, on a le processus qui est lancé, c'est de mettre en place ce système. Mais aujourd'hui, une fois que ce système, il y a tout un dispositif par rapport à la technologie, par rapport à une base de données fiable et fixe qu'il faudra mettre. Donc, le challenge, c'est le renforcement de capacité, mais il y a aussi l'accès aux ressources et l'accompagnement qu'il faut pour mettre en place ce système. Merci beaucoup.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to our panelists. And I would like to now close the webinar. We will share the recording and the presentations with you all, so please do look out for those. If you have any questions that we weren't able to cover today, please feel free to contact us. And please feel free to subscribe to the NAP Global Network's newsletter, the Adaptation Committee's newsletter, to access the latest news, analysis, and resources on National Adaptation Plan processes. Thanks so much for joining us again today, and have a wonderful rest of the day.